guys, so today I thought we would do a video on something a little bit different. So obviously there's a lot going on at the moment with the whole coronavirus, COVID-19 lockdown thing, and a lot of people talking about the lockdown, a lot of people are talking about the actual virus itself, but I've noticed a group of people that people aren't talking about quite as much as they should be, is people who experience domestic abuse, trans violence, and children who are in those types of situations. So I thought it would be nice to get on somebody who's an expert in that area. I consider you an expert. He's does a lot of work in this area, so I thought maybe he could sort of, you know, introduce himself, give some insight into the stuff he does, and then maybe give some tips in how you can keep yourself safe if you are subject to that kind of behaviour from anyone. So yeah, Danny, would you like to just introduce yourself and tell people a bit about what you do?
Yes, so my name's Danny. I'm one of the founders of an organisation called Empower the Invisible. So we're a peer support service. Everybody who works with me has got lived experience of childhood sexual abuse or CSE and has come out the other side and is in recovery. We deliver training to professionals, because including like sort of you know, the police, NHS staff, prison staff, we're going to prisons, because what we're seeing is we're seeing a revolving door. So people from all kinds of different support organisations are terrified to ask the question to somebody: have they been sexually abused when they was younger, or have they been through some kind of childhood trauma? And what we're seeing more and more is a revolving door in services, because practitioners haven't got the confidence to ask the question. They're frightened that they're going to open a can of worms and stuff. So what's happening in, say somebody's going into rehab or detox, or like a hostel who's got complex needs, and the core reason why they're using drugs, drinking, behaving like they're behaving if they're in prison is a lot of the time down to the trauma that they've been through. The trauma's not getting addressed. So that's something we kind of sort of fight to sort of empower professionals really who come into contact with people. We do one-to-one recovery coaching. We work alongside the police as well in Lancashire. So we've got a project called Beyond the Blade. So we work with young people who are at risk of CSE, involved in county lines, getting into gangs.
Sorry, what's
selling
county lines?
Pardon?
County.
So that's when older people are using young people to sell drugs and to kind of ferry the drugs from county to county, basically. But what we're finding is a lot of them are being taken advantage of and exploited in other ways, sexually as well. So it's going on to like sort of the COVID thing. So there's a hashtag at the moment called COVID safeguarding. Yeah. So what we're doing at the moment, we've got permission off the police to go and check on the young people that we work with, because as we know, just because it's on lockdown, you know, nothing's stopped. If anything, it's more kind of hidden away. So we've got permission to do welfare checks on young people. So I'm off there after we've finished speaking, go and check on the youth, see how they're doing and stuff.
Okay, and just to sort of rewind a bit, just for context, how did you actually get into this type of work, I guess is what you would call it? I'm so used to saying activism because I interview activists. Activism, it's proper work. It's not just filming a few videos and sticking them on YouTube. You're actually doing real work that affects real people.
Well, basically, myself personally, when I was a young person, I was sexually abused by my granddad, then sexually exploited from 15 up until 21. Made to sell drugs for somebody. I didn't have it on school and everything and crap when I was 15. But this guy who'd kind of took me under his wing and groomed him. So it's like sort of old-fashioned county lines, but they didn't have a name for it then. And my life went into turmoil, ended up in prison, rehab, mental health units, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't till I was like, I think I was about 33 or something like that I got a drug worker who sat me down and said, "Daniel, what is up with you? I don't know what to do with you," he said. And I thought, well, I clearly don't know what to do with me. So went back out, committing crime, taking more drugs. Then I went back to see him and he sat me down and he said to me, "Have you been through something when you was younger?" And spoke a little bit about himself, what he'd been through, and he'd been abused himself, and he was the manager of the detox unit. And I thought, flipping heck, it was a sigh of relief because I'd never met anybody before who'd been through, who'd spoken about what they'd been through as a man. Um, and he made me, well, he didn't make me, but he offered. He said, what I'll do is, he said, I'll get you into detox, and when you come out, I'll give you, you meet me on a Saturday morning every morning at 9 o'clock, and I'll give you 23 sessions of therapy. And he did that, and it was really difficult, to be honest with you. One of the hardest things I've done in my life. It was really embarrassing. I felt full of shame,
Did
full
you
of guilt.
find it, this, I guess it's a bit of an off-track question, but when you had the therapy, did you find it helped afterwards? Because I know with therapy, the way it works is often, obviously you need to want to do it, but it can obviously make you feel a lot worse initially because you're talking about all these things and having your emotions dug into. But ultimately, did you find that it helped?
Ultimately, it did help, but at the time, I didn't think it was helping because it was that painful. It was that shame and guilt. So when you're, I'm not saying it's any different for women, but I can only speak from a male's perspective. So when something like that happens to you, the most difficult thing to talk about was what happened when I was 15 and upwards, because I carried a lot of shame about that, around that, because it was like, why didn't I stop him doing what he was doing? Why did I let him do that to me? He was spiking me and raping me and stuff. But you know, I knew what was going on. But the thing is, I didn't have anywhere to live. I was stuck with him. I was selling drugs for him, and it was like sort of better the devil, you know. And how I got away from him is I ended up going to prison, which was a good thing. Well, that was difficult to talk about. But going back to your question about the therapy, the therapy was good and stuff, but it wasn't enough. So it was like, what happens? What next? What next after the therapy? Because we've talked it all through. I've got some coping mechanisms, and that's why we set up what we did. So what that guy gave me is, he gave me a gift. He gave me the gift of kind of pass it on. He passed on his experiences and his recovery to me, and that's when we set up our own organisation, peer support organisation. So it's all about that connection. So it's like, there doesn't seem to be, from therapy, in my perspective, my point of view, a good enough exit strategy for like kind of what now, right, your therapy's finished, see you later, you might be all right for a couple of months.
I agree with that. They just sort of leave you to it, don't they? They just, it's all right because they're like, oh, you have some coping mechanisms, and it may even help you clarify your feelings on certain issues or certain people. But at the end of the day, that still happened, and it's still horrible, whatever the issue may be. So
the best form of therapy, which I haven't had, but I know people have had, is, you might have heard of it, it's called EMDR. So it stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing, right? So it's fantastic for use with post-traumatic stress disorder. So how it come about in the first place was, they was using it for vets, people who've been in the military in like sort of Iraq, Afghanistan and stuff, and it kind of it really helps you like sort of process the memories and stuff. Most people I've seen kind of sort of well and sustain the recovery is people who've had EMDR.
Really?
But it's really difficult to get.
They like giving you CBT, don't they? It's the default for every single mental health issue. CBT, 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 and they love to classify everything as anxiety, whereas anxiety is like an umbrella term for many types of disorders: agoraphobia, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and I find they're a bit sort of chaotic with it. But yeah, I have heard of that, but I don't know anyone who's had it, because obviously I don't even think the standard practitioners do it. I don't even think they're trained.
No, specialist qualification. Can I just say something about CBT? I'm glad you've touched on that.
Yeah.
So I previously used to work at a trauma service for males who've been sexually abused before I've done my own thing. And I got sent on a course to university, a psychological wellbeing practitioners course, where you're like based in a doctor's, you do 6 sessions with somebody, and one of them's a phone call at the beginning. So it's like 5 sessions, it's like 40-minute sessions. So I'm sat on this course and stuff, and I did it for a couple of months. And the guy said to me, he said, this is no good for using with people who have had trauma. Because I'm like, how can you? So if the average time for a male is 25 to 27 years before they speak out about what's happened to them, how the hell are you going to undo that in flipping 6 40-minute sessions? It's not going to happen. So I left the course because I thought it's pointless. And that's where peer support comes in, because it's that ongoing support and building up your support network. So I'm a big believer in don't be dependent on services, because they will let you down and it will come to an end. So build something yourself. Don't just, come to us, see what we're doing, get some support there, and we'll support you to set something up yourself, because ultimately, whether that be financially or whatever the services, will not be able to offer what you need potentially, because it's
So
lifelong recovery.
that's true. Which areas do you actually operate in then?
So we cover the whole of Lancashire and the whole of Greater Manchester.
Okay, and if
So
people want to contact you, how can they do that?
So we've got our website, so it's www.empoweredinvisible.co.uk, or you can email admin@empoweredinvisible.co.uk.
Okay, and I know in the past you did, you dealt mostly with men, which there's nothing wrong with, because I feel like men are very almost abandoned in this area. But have you expanded now? Sort of, what's the deal with that now?
So what was happening is, I was getting a lot of females getting in touch through our Facebook page and stuff, like requesting help. And as a man, I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to be working with females, because I couldn't offer them the best service, because I'm not a woman, basically. Then fortunately for me, I came across a passionate lady who was setting something up herself. Then we decided to come together, because what was happening is these females was coming in for support. I'd have an initial conversation with them. I'd refer them on to somewhere else, and like within a couple of weeks they end up bouncing back saying I've got to wait 6, 12, 18 months for therapy and support. So what we did is, that's like standard procedure, that waiting time. So rather than having separate male and separate female groups, what we did is we joined them both together, and it worked really well, because there was a lot of part of your healing process. If you've been raped by a man, is not all men are rapists, and you can't avoid men. So at some point you're gonna have to kind of work through that issue. And I'm not saying trust men or trust every man or whatever, but kind of work through that stuff. So and what the common factor is, like, a lot of men have been raped by men as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's like we brought the groups together, and they've just blossomed really, and worked better than doing single sex groups. So it's like, why are the services separating males and females and causing that divide, and adding to loads of stuff you could go off on a tangent about. And for us, it works, and the proof's in the pudding. We've got a female recovery champion coming through, so and we've got a male one as well, and they're going to be running the group themselves. So what we do is, people come to group, we'll help them with the confidence and stuff. They'll empower themselves, because we can't empower nobody, because it's not sustainable if you don't empower yourself. Then we'll train them how to run the groups. Then they take over the group. Then we'll move on to a next area, set up another group, and just keep building and spread them as far across the country as we can. It just takes time.
Like that is actually really, it's such a fresh approach. I've not heard of anybody doing that. It's always the same old sort of stale thing. Oh, go to therapy, where it's like, like you said, 12 to 18 month wait, which is ridiculous for 6 sessions. I've noticed as well with the therapy, if someone misses one phone call, and it could be for a legitimate reason, it restarts again the whole 12 to 18 months. That doesn't work. The police often aren't particularly helpful, but I guess they're not really trained in that kind of thing, to be fair to them. They're meant to investigate the crime. And there just seems to be a lack of real, not even just for sexual abuse or domestic abuse, but there seems to be a lack of real support for people in terms of how to deal with this. And then the drops at the, drop of a hat, I think the saying is. And it just seems very hard for them to access these professionals. It's like, if you've been abused in any sense, you're going to definitely need mental health support. You're going to need possibly psychiatrists. You're definitely going to need psychologists and counsellors. And they're like these sort of mystical creatures, like a unicorn. We've all heard of a unicorn, but no one's seen them. What is a psychiatrist? What is a psychologist? Do they exist? What do they look like? So before we sort of go on to the tips about how to stay safe during lockdown, I'd just like to get your opinion as I don't know what's called, like a volunteer, a campaigner on how the public services have sort of handled this so far. So I think you said you're going out doing peer support, you called it now after we finished talking. So
Yes, well,
during the
yeah.
lockdown, what's your experience being so far? Are things worse? Are things better? How are the social services and the police handling it?
So in terms of adults first, what we're finding is there's a lot less men getting in touch, a lot men who I know who've previously accessed support, and kind of like sort of isolating themselves again and sinking into depression. And I don't know, but I think a lot of that could come down to feeling useless as a man. So if you're used to going out working and stuff, and you've got a sense of purpose and something to get up for the day, and you're providing for your family and stuff, and that's been taken away from you, which was part of your recovery capital, should we call it, and part of your coping mechanisms, that's been whipped out from under your feet. You're flipping stuck at home, and start sinking. And this is why we're speaking out a lot on social media to encourage more men to come forward, and like Rose is doing the same with women.
Why do you think men find it so hard to talk about it as opposed to women?
I think
It's sort of an obvious question, but I think it's still good to ask.
I think a lot of it's down to guilt and shame, to be honest with you, and society's perceptions of men who've been sexually abused or raped as being weak. I'm not saying that is society's perception, but that might be what you think society thinks about you. So if you think speaking out will make you less of a man, then maybe you're not going to speak out. There's like sort of fear around rejection from people, rejection from family members, fear of humiliation. So you might think your mates are going to laugh at you or take the piss out of you. And a lot of fear around kind of like sort of speaking out. So I think that's what's kind of going on at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's what we've noticed with also with the adults is there's no face-to-face contact. So they might have had mental health workers who used to come around, or adult social workers and stuff. So that's not happening. So because of the social distance and stuff. So this is why we've got five Zoom groups a week on now, checking groups and peer support groups to like sort of bridge that gap and put a plug in it as much as we can, kind of like social prescribing, basically doing it ourselves. In terms of the young people, it's difficult for them, to be quite honest with you, and the difficulty will be today when I go out is flipping if they're going to answer the door, if they're going to be up, if what you do happen. I'm not like go into any specific cases or anything, but what you can find is the parents will come to the door, and when the young people come out to see me, it'd be like, get back in the fucking house. You know what I mean? Go in the house. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I've not come to see you. I've come to see your kids. Do you know what I mean? We've had kids going out, still getting into trouble, still getting involved in this and that. And drug dealing doesn't stop, does it? Do you know what I mean?
No.
So exploitation of young people doesn't stop. The trauma doesn't stop. So it's all we can do at the moment is do welfare checks. Lancashire Police have been fantastic. So we've got the violence reduction unit.
Yeah, they
seem like
being much better than GMP, much better.
Yeah. So the violence reduction unit is built up of like sort of really good coppers who you wouldn't think was coppers. If you didn't see someone with a uniform on, you'd probably think there was a really good social workers. Do you know what I mean? So they've been dead supportive, understand the needs of adults and young people, and have given me like sort of permission to go out and do welfare checks and stuff.
You're funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner as well, aren't you? You've got funding. Yeah. All that.
Yeah. So
cool.
we're funded by them. We're funded by the NHS as well.
Oh, wow.
So like we're on the NHS portal for like training. So if somebody needs if an organisation needs training, or someone in the NHS needs training against around childhood sexual abuse and exploitation, then it's kind of us. Well, we're like a trusted preferred provider for training of the NHS, like sort of using our lived experience, so with our professional hat on and our lived experience hat on and stuff. I don't know I've not come across any young people that I've spoke to that have had a visit from social services. So that's why, not that I totally trust social services to start with.
No,
to be honest
I've
with
heard many bad things. No interactions with them, but I've never heard of a single good thing about them.
It's very rare you get a really good social worker, and those, when you do get a really good social worker, they generally don't last and they'll move over to another department, because they're normally the ones that think outside the box, will go the extra mile for the young person, and they'll get handpicked from somewhere else. Because the thing is that social services, a lot of agency staff there, so there's a massive turnover, so there's no consistency with the young people. So, you know, as an adult, it's bad enough, but as a child, if something's happened to you, you've been through some kind of trauma, having to repeat your story again and again is re-traumatizing. Makes you feel like you're not being listened to, and it's just shit, basically. It's not good practice, but that's what's happening.
That's really, really terrible. To be honest, yeah, like I say, I've never had any interactions really with I've not had any at all with social services. But through doing all the activism and the YouTube and the law stuff, I have met a lot of people who have, and they always seem to have a bad story to tell. And one of the things I've noticed throughout this entire event, shall we call it, with the pandemic, is I mostly follow police accounts because law is what I do. That's what I see on a daily basis. But I've noticed there's a lot of official accounts, police included, government included, and they seem more intent on tweeting about how you shouldn't be driving to a certain place to walk your dog. Apparently they've changed that now, but we'll see. How you should be doing this, keep 2 meters apart. There doesn't really seem to be any sort of official accounts or people, who are influential public figures tweeting about the domestic abuse issue. And if you think about it, particularly for children, what are they supposed to do when they're locked in the house with these abusers? The abusers are going to be rubbing their hands together to think, oh, I've got this child locked in the house. They're even more vulnerable, dependent than normal. And on top of that, the police and the government and social services and the people who should be interested don't seem interested at all. The abuse is probably tenfold what it normally is. It's terrible.
So I was looking on the internet before, and there's a few articles that were saying there's been the amount of telephone calls that domestic violence services have been receiving have doubled as well. But I think it's a really interesting time for me, because there's people, charities, organisations that have literally got like sort of millions in the bank and stuff, who bleat on about sexual abuse and domestic violence. But what makes me laugh is what they're doing now is they're showing themselves up and exposing themselves for actually doing fuck all. You know what I mean? They might put a little advert out and stuff, but what's come to the forefront is those people who are passionate about people getting into recovery from domestic violence and sexual abuse and stuff. That's who you're seeing about talking about it. And all these people who are absolutely loaded have just like sort of disappeared and, working from home and not adjusting and putting provisions in for people who they claim to be passionate about. So they're just kind of sort of exposing themselves as doing nothing.
Do you know what? I completely agree, and it's interesting that you say that as well, because again, it's from a different perspective. It's from a legal perspective. But when I've been talking about the human rights issues of lockdown, whether it's justifiable, whether there's some areas of it which discriminate against, say, disabled people, because they're saying you can't sit down. Well, what if you live in a studio flat and you physically disabled? What, you're not allowed to go in the park? Is that lawful? And I think it's really bad that it's just people who really don't. I mean, I know you have funding, but you're not rich. I think it's terrible that people like us have had to sort of take up those reins from the, arms of the state, which are meant to be trained in this. And I thought, at this time, where are the lawyers? Where are the academics? Where are the barristers? Where are the judges? None of them are saying anything about the human rights issue. I've seen a few QCs, which are like the top barristers, writing articles for the Times, which no doubt they're paid handsomely for, but they're not doing anything. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this is your time to shine. You're just sat there
drinking mojitos in the hot tubs in the back gardens. That's what they'd be doing.
Article.
But if you looked on their personal Facebook pages, it'd be pictures like that.
Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? You just think, oh my God, what is wrong with the world? It's terrible. But yeah, so on to like the final bit of the interview slash stream slash whatever you want to call it. You've got some contact details, haven't you? Or I don't know if you have those with you off the top of your head, which people can call, and this goes for anyone, children, women, men. If you're subject to domestic abuse or sexual abuse, you can go to these organisations, and I'll put the links below as well.
Cool. So an organisation that I know personally that offer good service, because there's no point me saying about, oh, there's this, that, this, that, this, when there's shit. Do you know what I mean? But SafeNet, who cover the whole of Lancashire, are a fantastic organisation. Now, if you're not from the area, I'd still advise contacting them, and they'll signpost you properly. So the telephone number is 0300 3033 581. So I'm not sure, they might take people out of the area as well. I'm not sure. But the amazing thing about these is that they've got a live chat, which is now available 7 days a week. So that's 10 till 12, 2 till 4, and 8 till 10, delivering confidential one-to-one support, help and advice. And the amazing thing about these, which you don't see a lot of other organisations, is they've also got a men's refuge as well. So they're really forward thinking, and they've got some really good professionals who work there and stuff. Can I just add one more thing in? So if you're if it's a real difficult this, because domestic violence is such a complex issue, with the emotional, financial, sexual abuse that kind of goes on, marital rape, all that kind of stuff. There's children involved, so there might be many reasons why you don't leave that situation. And one of the worst things that you can say to someone who's a victim of domestic violence is, why don't you just walk out the door and leave? If only if it was that kind of simple. So just like a couple of like sort of tips. So my best advice is to flip and ring 999, to be honest with you. Now, if you can't talk at that time, what you do is you ring 999 and you press 55, and what that'll do is that'll alert that it's a domestic violence call. So you just keep the phone kind of off the hook and just make some kind of noise, whether that's a cough or whatever, and they will send the police straight to your house, and the police will know what's going on. The only other kind of like sort of tip, so if if you want help and you've not got access to social media because the person won't let you online, won't let you speak to anybody, but they are sending you out the house for shopping or whatever, write something on a little note, make sure you write your name and address clearly, and just put help on it, pass it to a cashier, drop it on the floor, give it to a neighbour, whatever that kind of sort of may be. It's really difficult, to be honest with you, but it's about being as sort of creative as you can to like sort of get the message out there whilst keeping yourself kind of sort of safe within your house, which if you're a victim of domestic violence, it's pretty much impossible to keep yourself safe while you're in that house.
Yeah. So is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's it really. I'd just like to thank you for your time and helping us like sort of raise the issue, and kind of expose a taboo subject that nobody wants to talk about because it's not nice, it's not pretty, it's dirty. If what we do with what we do is, if anything, we can carry a message of hope. I know many people in recovery from child sexual abuse, adult rape, and domestic violence who are now living the kind of sort of best life they can and are safe. And if it couldn't be done, then I wouldn't be sat here now talking to you. I'd either be in prison or in a crack den smoking myself to death, overdosing. You can get well. So, the message is like sort of we do recover.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I think what you do is really great. I think it's really inspiring, and I think it's sort of, like I say, it's new and it's fresh, and it puts the police and social services and stuff to shame, because they should be doing stuff like this. They should be doing this job. They should be thinking of fresh new ways to help people, but they're not. So yeah, I just sort of hope that, I can be as useful as you one day to people that need help. But yeah, it would be great to have you on again and to chat about the other stuff you do. It's so interesting.
Oh, thank you. And just a big up to Lancashire Police and the Violence Reduction Unit there for taking a risk on us because we're something different, having faith in us and like sort of supporting the work what we do. which isn't my experience of the police by any way, shape, or form in the past, particularly
Oh, I
GMP.
will just ask you one last question. In
Yeah,
comparison to Lancashire Constabulary, because they actually seem like they've been great. Well, you said they've been great, so that's good.
yeah,
How has
yeah. With
GMP
us,
behaved with you? Because I know Billy from PAG, he says
yeah.
that they're actually quite hostile and they're not very accommodating. I know that works slightly different, but
Um, I in my previous job at the trauma service, I delivered training to all frontline officers at GMP. So we trained about 600 staff, including non-police staff as well, in how to deal with male victims of childhood sexual abuse and stuff. So
yeah.
rather than like kind of sort of my experiences in the past, which yeah, I take full responsibility for my behaviour, my criminal behaviour in the past and stuff. But rather than getting beat up in the back of the van or whatever, if somebody had sat me down at that time and said to me, Daniel, what is up with you? Why are you behaving like that? Then maybe they could have stopped. They could have saved themselves a shitload of money, to be honest with you, because it costs a fortune to put someone in prison. If they'd directed me in the right way and got me some help, maybe things would have been different and I'd have got better sooner. But I've got no faith in GMP whatsoever. When someone comes to me, I'll be honest with you, and says, what a report, what's happened to me to the police, I just praying it's not GMP. Then when they say it's GMP, it's like I just try and keep a straight face and just support them through that process, because we support people from report like all the way to court and stuff. And my experience of reporting my abuse of GMP was an absolute joke, to be honest with you. The CPS came back and the copper was at it. I'm not saying I believe you, Daniel, and I'm not saying I don't believe you. He didn't interview everybody properly. He sent the information, what he had, back to over to the CPS to see whether they was going to charge or not. Bearing in mind, this guy, there was loads of people come forward for him as well, telling the same experience of what I had and how he treated me. And the CPS came back and he said, we spoke to all your schools. So I've been to 9 different primary schools when I was little because of what was going on and stuff and my behaviour. And they went, we spoke to all your schools, and what they've said is you was a delinquent when you was a child. So because you was a delinquent when you was a child, you're not a credible witness. Even though this sexual abuse happened to me when I was under 16, at 15, they said we can't work out whether you consented or not. Now this guy was spiking me and raping me while I was in my school uniform. They went, you told us you was 15, but we say you was 16. So even at that time, if you go back to so even at that time, say if I was a consenting person to sexual activity with a male, the law says that was illegal at that time anyway, to have a homosexual relationship. It wasn't consenting. I was spiked and fucking raped. You know what I mean? So I've had absolute murders with GMP, and it's still ongoing. I've had to park it to one side because it was making me ill, to be honest with you. So that's why we're not with GMP and don't do anything with GMP, because I don't trust them as far as I can throw them.
Well,
and I'm sure
honest,
there's some as you know, JONAYA.
Yeah. Obviously, we're not going to go into that because this isn't about me and my issues, not even half as bad as the issues that you've dealt with them with. But no, I would reiterate the point that basically I would actually say to people, if you have an issue and you can report it out of area, I would do that, even though the problem is what happens with crimes. So if you say you visit Manchester one day and someone robs you and you're from London and then you go home and report it to the Metropolitan Police, what happens is they will initially take the details, but then it will be referred to Manchester to investigate. But at least if you've got a referral from another police force, they might take it differently. When I was investigating a crime, I've got a house somewhere else. I actually reported it there in the hopes that Manchester would investigate it through referral, but they still did nothing. So just about GMP.
Can I just touch on something there, JONAYA, as well? That's dead important. So, for nearly 5 years, I worked for the Home Office. I was a consultant for the Home Office on the independent inquiry into child abuse. And one of the issues that we kept bringing up was the very issue that you just spoke about. So, say, what happens if there's a police officer? So, say if you was raped in Manchester, yeah, and the police officer's covering it up, or it was a police officer who'd sexually abused or raped you, or you know, say you was a teenager at the time and you was told to, you were just being silly, stop making things up and all that kind of stuff. What happens is it gets referred back to that same police force. So those people who are involved in the abuse and the corruption are dealing with your case. This was the problem in the first place. So it's like you marking your own homework. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that's not changed. So that's one thing we was kind of like sort of fighting to change, and that never changed because it's a major issue. It's not thought through or anything. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the police system needs major reform. I mean, I'm hoping career-wise to end up at a point when I'm more experienced and advanced to mostly just be focusing on police law. That's what I would like to do.
Yeah.
And climb as high as I can with that, not just bringing like claims and stuff, but hopefully put pressure on the government somehow to reform the police, because they just pretty much leave them to it to do whatever they like. And the courts, from what I've read, they're very unwilling to deem police actions unlawful. I mean, this is going on to a bit of a different issue now, but they're just sort of left to do whatever they want, left to be corrupt. I mean, you know, the IOPC, obviously it was the IPCC, it was reformed because apparently the public had no faith in the IPCC, and I think it actually says on the government's website, I can't quote it word for word, the IOPC was created to restore public faith in the police. The only thing that changed in that organisation is one of the letters in the name. I mean, if you look at obviously it's a statutory creation, I think it was created by the Police Reform Act, and they are so restricted in their powers. It's made in such a way that professional standards of that police force pretty much have to investigate any complaints. The IOPC are literally restricted in law from investigating most of the complaints. So if you say, oh, I want the IOPC to investigate this, they kind of can't do it. And for professional standards to just be left to investigate themselves, it's just ridiculous. I mean, the whole reason we have the separation of powers in this country is because we understand that, I guess, to quote again a famous philosopher, power should be a check to power. You can't investigate or check yourself because there's going to be corruption. So why doesn't that apply to the police when our whole democracy and political system's based on the idea that you need to have different bodies checking each other in order to have fairness, transparency and balance? Makes no sense.
But you know what the big joke is about the IPCC or IOPC, however they want to call it now, is when it was IPCC, because we've had, as you can imagine, we've had murders with them, trying to hold them to account and stuff for different things. There was an FOI flying about, and it was made up of something like 70% ex-police officers and detectives. So, yet again, the police are investigating themselves. It's just a joke, innit? It's just a token gesture.
That's actually ridiculous. Did you know who Crimebodge is?
Are you surprised?
Well, no, I'm not even slightly surprised. There's a guy called Crimebodge. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a YouTuber. And you'll probably like him. He does a lot of police stuff. And there was a guy who went to him who he helped because I think, if I remember, it was this case, a police officer headbutted him. And what happened is, obviously, he started the complaints process. Obviously, it went through PSD. One of the people who was on the case working in professional standards was the wife of the police officer who the man was complaining about. And the only reason that came out was it was through a mistake. The police didn't say, oh, this shouldn't have happened or take her off or anything. It just came out by accident. And I thought, oh my God, this is just ridiculous. How can you expect any level of transparency or justice when they're just left to investigate themselves? I mean, you know the Charlene Downs case as well, that's obviously Lancashire Constabulary. Apparently they'd been telling victims, oh, we won't prosecute someone for rape, but if you help us, you can get this man for the murder of Charlene Downs, and that's how you can get him, and that's how you can have justice. And no one does anything, nobody cares.
Yeah, I can believe that, Standard procedure, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. Anyway, I think we'll leave it there just because we're going up on a bit of a tangent. But yeah, I'd love to have you on again sometimes. Hopefully meet up when lockdown's not on, when it's ended. And we can use the proper cameras and stuff. But yeah, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Mate.
We'll speak to you soon, and good luck with your work today.
All right, nice one, JONAYA. See you in a bit, mate. Bye-bye.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I know it got a bit waffly at the end. We'll probably meet up again to touch on that. What I would like to say is, if you are in a domestic abuse situation or any kind of abusive situation, first of all, I'm happy to talk to you. I mean, I'm not an expert. Can't necessarily do anything per se, but if you just want to chat, that's fine. You can email me. My contact details are below. Danny's details are below as well. And also, I think it's important to point out that if you are subject to domestic abuse or anything like that, you are in law allowed to still leave the house when the lockdown is on. I will put the law up on the screen now because I can't remember the exact, I know the legislation, but I can't remember the specific section, but there it is. So you can leave the house. You can leave the house for arguments. Please don't think that you're going to be prosecuted or arrested, although I can't promise you won't be, because obviously sometimes things happen that shouldn't. But the law says that you should not be arrested if you leave the house for these reasons. So please do not put up with any horrible situations that you shouldn't have to be subjected to because you think that will happen to you. Also, I would just like to say I have a petition going at the moment, which is to do with the grooming gangs, and we want to prosecute the police. We want to have them prosecuted, the ones who are involved in covering it up. It's on about 4.1k signatures at the moment. We want to try and get it to about 10, and when the lockdown's over, we'd like to go and physically hand this into GMP. So if you could sign that and share it, that would be great, please, because the more signatures, the better. If we can get it over 10,000, that's fantastic. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, guys. I hope it was somewhat useful to you. My details are below if you would like to donate to the channel, if you would like to follow me on social media. And I hope you're all doing well in lockdown. And if you're vulnerable, please take care and don't hesitate to contact any of the agencies that Danny's spoken of, or even contact me or anyone else. Don't suffer in silence is essentially what I'm saying. So yeah, take care, guys.